Every video game player out there has that one game that sticks with them more than any other game they have ever played. Perhaps it was because it helped them create wonderful memories, make it easier to make friends, possibly even found their future soulmate. Or it helped them through one of the most difficult points in their lives. And I am no different. For me, that game is The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is a game that I have had quite a history with. I was originally scared to play it at first because of the many dark themes present. Then I got around to playing it, and I thought that it was great. It wasn't my favorite game yet at that point, but it would be soon. For on April 20th, 2015, a dear friend of mine, Caleb Terpstra, unfortunately died prematurely. And needless to say, I was devastated. This was really the first time I had ever experienced grief over someone I loved, not counting pets that my family had. It hurt even more considering that he died 2 days before my 14th birthday. Fortunately, the present I received on that day helped me through it. It was the remake of Majora's Mask for the Nintendo 3DS, and with all the gameplay improvements featured in the remake, Majora's Mask slowly became my favorite game of all time, even if I didn't know why back then. Now, 4.5 years later after Caleb's death, and over 120 video game reviews later, I feel like I can finally explain to everyone why it holds the title of favorite video game. There are so many things about this game that make it amazing that I want to make sure this review does it justice. I don't know how many rewrites it'll take, but I am going to make sure that I never leave anything out that I want to talk about with this game. With that said, I'm the Super Gamer, and this is The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Because the story and lore is an integral part of why I love this game, I'll only be going over the basic synopsis in this section. That said, Majora's Mask takes place directly after Ocarina of Time, with Link looking for his fairy companion Navi, who just left Link at the end of the game for no real reason. Link is traveling through the woods with Epona when suddenly a strange kid with a mysterious mask shows up and robs Link of his horse and the Ocarina of Time. Link gives chase until he falls down a hole right into the strange land of Termina. He is then taunted by the masked figure and finds himself transformed into a Deku Scrub, leaving him for dead with one of the Skull Kid's fairies left behind. Link, now a Deku Scrub, finds himself in a clock tower where he encounters the Happy Mask Salesman, another strange figure who, well, sells masks. He tells us that the mask being worn on the Skull Kid belongs to him and requests we get it back in exchange for Link returning to normal. The only catch is that he has to leave town in about 72 hours, or 3 days, and we need to get it before that. On the third day, Link climbs to the top of the clock tower to find Skull Kid with a giant, terrifying moon with a face on it slowly crashing down on Clock Town. Luckily, Link manages to obtain the Ocarina back, and with a quick flashback to Zelda from Ocarina of Time, is able to turn back the clock to the first day. Link is then taught the Song of Healing by the Happy Mask Salesman, which is able to turn Link into normal. After the salesman finds out we failed to retrieve the mask, he freaks out and explains why that mask is so important. The mask that Skull Kid was wearing is Majora's Mask, a mask that was used long ago by ancient tribes for hexing rituals, but were eventually forced to seal away the mask because of the potential catastrophe it could cause in the wrong hands. And that is our mission throughout the whole game. Travel to each part of Termina to find a way to put a stop to Skull Kid's wave of destruction caused by the moon, all while reliving the same 3 days over and over. And without spoiling it, that mask has caused a lot more harm than any of us have realized. Compared to Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask is a bit of a graphical upgrade in comparison, which is probably due to the fact that this game was one of the 3 games that required the Nintendo 64 expansion pack, which was used to not only improve the hardware, but also upgrade the graphics so that games like Donkey Kong 64 and Perfect Dark could run on the system. With that in mind, I think that Majora's Mask is graphically better than a lot of other N64 games. Not quite the best, but still better than a lot of other games on the system. But what really makes this game stand out from the rest of the Zelda games is its art style. There's a reason that people say that it's the Tim Burton of Zelda games, because its use of colors and saturation is used to portray two different themes, weird and quirky, as well as dark, depressing, and disturbing, which fits the tone of the game's plot quite well. I now want to take a moment to appreciate how the music is integrated into the many areas of the game. Now, right off the bat, the music is great stuff, but to truly appreciate its use, I want to show you all how they're all connected. Let me explain. Each of the 4 main areas, not including Clocktown, have the same melody, but the mood is changed to match their respective locations. For example, the Southern Swamp has the medley seem damp and thick, implying that it's not a very welcoming place. Next, the Snowhead Mountains theme is composed to sound chilling and almost wasteland-like, which is fitting since some of the snow isn't supposed to be here at all in this area. Then, the Great Bay theme sounds expansive and atmospheric to match the themes of the ocean. And finally, Akana Canyon's theme is made to sound dark, dead, possibly even possessed, to give the player a troubling feeling that this area has gone through hell, and what we're seeing is only the aftermath of death taking its toll. So those were the main areas, but what about Clocktown? Well, Clocktown uses a similar composition to match the tone of each day that you travel through it. The first day plays out like it's just another day in Clocktown, with not a care in the world. The second day has a tone that, although it's yet another day in Clocktown, there's also a sense of urgency in the song, since half of our time is gone and we need to start picking up the pace a bit. The final day has removed the relaxing mood of the first two songs, and its pace now implies that time is running out and that we don't have a moment to spare until Judgment Day arrives. And to top it all off, the theme that plays during the final hours of the 3-day cycle shows a sense of ominous doom and that death is almost at this town's doorstep. However, the song that tops all of that is one of the first songs you hear in the game, and one that perfectly portrays the tone of the game as a whole. If you've never heard it, well, it's called The Song of Healing. This song has a very good reason for being the most iconic song in Majora's Mask, because it fits the mood of this game so well. The song is composed in a way which tells a story of someone who is filled with guilt and sorrow, but is soon able to accept what has happened to them, let go of their guilt, and move on. These are the kind of emotions that people go through with grief. We've all experienced it in one way or another, and this song so brilliantly embodies those feelings of grief and sadness, but also forgiveness and acceptance. It's one of my favorite pieces in any game ever, and really this whole soundtrack is one of my favorites for how brilliantly constructed it is. Sure, a good portion of it is reused from Ocarina of Time, like the horse ride theme, but most of the game's music perfectly represents the story this game is trying to tell. I would go more into this, but I'll wait a bit just in case you want to play the game yourself. For now though, let's focus on something a little lighter and talk about the gameplay. If you liked Ocarina of Time, chances are you'll probably like this game too, since its game mechanics are mostly the same from before. You travel through the world of Termina, slaying monsters, playing through dungeons, and discovering secrets. Young Link is now a lot more capable of doing things than he was in Ocarina of Time, since he can now use items like the hookshot, bow and arrow, and the Hylian shield without needing his older self's size. Your main tool is the Ocarina of Time itself, since it'll be used for things like traveling, helping them any NPCs, and changing time. You have 3 different ways to change time: slow it down, travel forward in time, and reset time back to the first day. The other main item to collect in this game are the 24 different masks. These masks are used to help you with certain tasks. For example, the bunny hood increases your movement speed and makes traveling on foot so much faster, the stone mask makes you invisible to most enemies and characters, and the Great Fairy mask attracts fairies from dungeons to you so that you can get upgrades from the many different Great Fairies. The rest, to be honest, are either situational or totally useless. Realistically, only 1/4 of the masks actually have versatile use. The rest are either used to get a piece of heart somewhere in the game, or are completely worthless once their purpose is served. The most important masks, however, are the transformation masks. These masks change you into the resident species of the many areas in the game, mainly a Deku Scrub, a strong and tough Goron, and a graceful swimmer that is a Zora. There is also the Giant's Mask, but that is only used for one boss fight, so I can hardly call it a transformation mask for how useless it is afterwards. With all these useless masks in the game, one would wonder, why would I ever want to collect them anyway? Well, two reasons. One, I find that actually doing the quest to get those masks are way more fun than the masks themselves, and two, if you do collect all the masks in Termina, you'll be able to collect the special 24th mask at the end of the game, but we'll talk about that one later on. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to go over my gripes with the game. Yes, even though this is my favorite game of all time, it's not perfect. First off, while the ability to travel forwards in time is cool and all, you're only allowed to travel to 6 AM or 6 PM of the current day, meaning for some side quests, you have to stand around waiting for the right hour to show up in order to continue the side quests. This is apparent for a lot of side quests in the game, especially for quests that take place across all 3 days. Second, the owl statues are what's used to save the game, but they can only be used to save your progress if you want to turn the game off for the time, meaning that the only way to save and continue is to reset to the first day. Keep in mind, on the original hardware, combined with the expansion pack, Majora's Mask has been known for crashing because of the hardware limitations. Granted, I played this game on the Wii Virtual Console, but it's still a problem. And finally, the Water Temple is easily the worst part of the game. Now, people like to hag on the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time because it's confusing to navigate. Well, even though I think it's easy to get used to the layout once you've played it enough times, Majora's Mask Water Temple may be less confusing, but in my opinion, has much worse bosses. I mean, you have to admit that the best part of the Water Temple in Ocarina of Time is the Dark Lake boss fight halfway through, and even the main boss of the temple is pretty alright. Majora's Mask, however, ooh. First, we have the eyeball boss, which is incredibly annoying with all the slime balls bouncing around, making it tedious to hit the eye's weak spot. The boss key boss is just kind of but the main boss of the temple, Georg, is the worst. He's not that hard to damage, but trying to avoid his attacks and not die is such a pain. Whenever you fall into the water, either by going in to damage him or he knocks you in, you have about 5 seconds to get back to the platform before he comes out of the side of the camera and eats up your health faster than you could say, "Fuck this game."
Disclaimer, Majora's Mask is actually the best game ever.
When you do reach this boss fight, please bring a bottled fairy with you. I guarantee you will die at least once on this boss. Well, now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm now going to go further into some of the many characters and themes present in the game, which will involve a lot of spoilers. So just in case you don't want to be spoiled, skip to this timestamp in the video. I'll give you 5 seconds. With that done, let's dive right into the darkness, shall we? Now, Majora's Mask has a lot of characters to mention, though not all of them are worth going into more detail about. So just to make sure I mention some favorites of mine, let's have ourselves a roll call! The Bomber Gang. They are a gang of kids in Clocktown that know of a secret passageway leading to the observatory and give you a book that tracks the people you've helped out in Clocktown. Guru, a music box man who had strong envy of the leader of an animal group and stole their mask. Gorman, a circus leader who is also a depressed alcoholic. Sakan, the town thief who likes stealing bags from old ladies and has a secret hideout hidden in Akana Canyon. Kamaro, a weird, creepy dancing man who wishes to teach his dancing to the world by giving you a mask with his head sewn onto it so that you can teach the creepy dance to these two young ladies. The town guards, who refuse to let any kid out of town, but if you have a sword, then apparently it's okay. The postman, he delivers your mail at a marcher's pace. Toto, a Zoran musician that hopes to compose the Ballad of the Windfish for the big carnival. The Gorman brothers, they sell milk, which isn't actually theirs because they're thieves who steal milk from the local Romani ranch. The creepy lake professor, he just sits around waiting for Zora eggs to be delivered and never questions anything at all. Shiro, the royal guard who cannot be seen by anyone, for he is as noticeable as a rock, who is also whom you heal to get the stone mask from. The Akana King and his lackeys, skeletons that rule over Akana Canyon even in the afterlife. Everyone's favorite 35-year-old man in green spandex, please give a round of applause for the one, the only, Tangle! Tingle here, although being the weirdest character in all of Zelda, sells maps and yells magic words that he came up with, whose father is a guide in Southern Swamp, whom if you give a picture to will tell you how strange but kind-hearted he is, and give you a piece of heart. Somehow. And last but certainly not least, a guy who fell inside of the toilet in the Stockpot Inn, which if you give a piece of paper, will give you a piece of heart he found down there. It's really best to just not think about that too much, trust me. Now that that's done, let's go over a few specific characters more in depth. First off, we have Romani and her sister Crimea of Romani Ranch. This place is also where you collect the bunny hood by using a chicken mask to make the chickens grow up by marching. But anyway, right off the bat, you can't actually access the ranch until the third day because of this giant boulder in the way. Once the boulder is removed, you'll find a young girl named Romani who looks like she's been through something terrible. Once you have access to the powdered kegs as a Goron and blow up the rock on the first day, you'll be able to go back to the ranch to find not only your horse Epona, but also Romani a lot happier than last time. It's at this point she reveals that aliens from outer space come down to the ranch every year and steal the cows, and that she wants you to help her fend them off. Sounds like a load of cow dung, right? Well, apparently it's not. If you wait until 2 AM that night, aliens will show up all over the ranch. So she was right all along. If you keep the aliens at bay, you'll be rewarded a milk jar from Romani. Yet, it doesn't stop there. The next day, you can find out that her sister, Crimea, is planning to deliver the milk to the local milk bar. Not just any old milk, but a special, possibly alcoholic milk known as Chateau Romani. You can choose to help her deliver, while you'll have to protect the milk delivery from the Gorman brothers from before. If you're successful, Crimea will give you the Romani mask as thanks, which also gives you access to the milk bar even as a minor. However, if you do the quest again after getting the mask, you'll get something even better. A booby hug! Yeah! Time well spent! And now it's time to talk about the side quest that pretty much defined Majora's Mask. The Anju and Kaife side quest. On the first day, you could find the fat lady in East Clocktown that will ask you to find her missing son, Kaife, who also coincidentally happened to be dating the innkeeper of the Stockpot Inn, Anju, before his disappearance. Later on that day, Anju will receive a letter from Kaife from the postman, which will give you the option to tell Anju that you're looking for him as well. After meeting with her later that night and being given a letter to deliver, on the second day you'll find a mysterious purple-haired figure with a Pikachu mask living by the laundry pool. Sneak inside for when he's checking his mailbox and it'll be revealed that Kaife is the masked person, who was an engaged man cursed to be a child by the Skull Kid. You tell Anju the news, and on the final day, when you go to see Kaife again, instead you'll find the owner of the Curiosity Shop, who tells you that Kaife has gone to Akana Canyon. You'll find Kaife hiding behind some rocks in front of the secret hideout of Sakan, the thief who steals the bomb bag from an old lady on night 1. Once you sneak inside and race against the clock to reach the end of the room, Kaife is able to retrieve the sun mask, which was his wedding mask. And during the final hours, Anju will be waiting for Kaife in the Stockpot Inn, and eventually Kaife does return. The engaged couple are reunited, promise to each other their vows, and choose to face their impending doom together as one. This is probably one of the most heartfelt and yet heartbreaking side quests I've ever seen in a video game. A couple is separated, all because of all the damage the Skull Kid has done. But while it may seem that Skull Kid doesn't care about the consequences of his actions, in truth, the Skull Kid is merely a puppet. He's just the poor, unfortunate soul who has to serve as the mask's slave. The mask salesman wasn't lying when he said the mask was dangerous, because the spirit inside the mask doesn't care about anything or anyone. It's all just a game to him. The last thing I want to talk about before the endgame is the hidden messages in the game. When you take all of these events and themes at face value, it may seem like just a land that has been royally screwed by Majora's Mask. However, for those who look deeper, you may find that all the locations and the order you explore them all line up to something. I know this has been talked about before, but I really want to show you all something quite possibly brilliant. Have any of you ever heard of the 5 stages of grief? It was introduced by Swiss-American psychiatrist Elisabeth Kubler-Ross. It's a model that summarizes the feelings one goes through with grief. The stages in order are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Let's go through these one by one with the order of locations in Majora's Mask. First, we have Denial in Clocktown. After interacting with the NPCs a bit, it becomes clear that even though it is said that the world will be destroyed by the moon in 3 days' time, almost nobody in town is bothered by it. As a matter of fact, the Carnival of Time is planned to happen on the day the world ends, proving that nobody wants to admit their inevitable fate and they just try to ignore it or say it's a myth. Next, we have Anger in Southern Swamp. When you first arrive, you'll find that the Deku Princess has been kidnapped and taken to the nearby dungeon in Woodfall, all while the Deku King has mistaken an innocent monkey as the culprit. Now you might think that the king is an idiot for thinking so, since there's no actual proof the monkey did kidnap her, but really, the king is just angry. People don't tend to think straight when they're angry. In other words, logic is thrown out the window and they go by what their feelings tell them. Next is Bargaining in Snowhead, which we find the ghost of a Goron warrior, Darmani. We follow the ghost to his grave, in which he tells us that he failed to defeat the monster in the dungeon and pleads us to resurrect him. He's bargaining for a second chance at life, which he knows deep down he'll never get. In the same way that when a loved one is found to have cancer or will be dying soon, people will plead and pray to their religion that the loved one to be spared, even though it almost never happens. Then, there's Depression in the Great Bay. You'll find the singer of the Zoran band standing outside of with her voice lost, because the local pirates have stolen the eggs laid by her. Because of that, she feels depressed and powerless. That's exactly how people feel when they're faced with loss or have lost someone they care about. Heck, it's how I felt when I played this game back during my grief. And finally, there's Acceptance in Akana Canyon. Inside the local castle, you'll find the king of Akana, whose spirit is still fighting in a war that has long since passed, and by defeating him and his lackeys, you're able to help him accept what has happened and be put to rest, accepting the loss he's experienced and moving on. Now, that is simply beautiful on its own, but it was even more beautiful for me when I played the 3DS remake when I was going through grief. At the time, I was going through all of these exact emotions: powerlessness, depression, anger, and yes, acceptance. So, do you see now why this is my favorite game of all time? The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is not only an amazing game through and through, but the many themes, characters, and emotions the games go through is one that I've never seen in any other video game. Sure, there have been plenty of other games to explore the meanings of life and death. Examples include Undertale, Celeste, BioShock, and so much more, but there never has and never will be another game that handles grief quite the same way as Majora's Mask does. Majora's Mask is definitely not a perfect game, but I will say, it's pretty dang close. But wait, don't leave just yet! We're still not done. There's still the end game left. Once you've completed all 4 dungeons, freed all of the giants, and collected every single mask up to this point, you are now ready to face the Skull Kid once again. Head to the top of Clock Tower again during the final hours and play the Oath to Order. The 4 giants will show up to stop the moon from crashing into the tower. Everything seems to work out, until Majora's Mask tosses away Skull Kid's body like utter garbage and heads into the moon to, in his words, consume everything. You chase after him to find a tree in the middle of the field with a bunch of masked kids playing. If you have all the masks up to this point, you can compete in a few more small dungeons while playing with the kids, who all have striking resemblance to the Happy Mask Salesman. Not only by appearance, but they'll also ask you questions about what the meaning of happiness is and what makes you happy. Once all that's done, it's just you and Majora. If you collected all the masks and gave them to the 4 other children, you'll be given the Fierce Deity's mask, which will transform you into a dark and powerful demon. It all comes down to the final confrontation of Majora. Honestly, this boss is a piece of cake with the Fierce Deity's mask, but in the end is an awesome payoff to such a deep and engaging narrative. Majora is finally defeated once and for all, Skull Kid is now back to normal and friendly, and the Happy Mask Salesman takes the powerless mask and simply fades out of existence. Meanwhile, in Termina, the Zora band gets to perform, the Deku Kingdom comes to terms with the monkey's friendship, Romani pursues archery with her sister, and Anju and Kaife are finally wed, with a huge ceremony outside of town. Finally, after all is said and done, Link rides back into Hyrule with Epona and continues his search for Navi in the forest. Happily ever after. So, after all that, do you see now why I want to make this game my last review on this channel? This game just means so much to me that I wouldn't want to end it off with anything else. I have played a lot of games over the years, both on the channel and off, but there will never be another game as important to me as Majora's Mask is. To put it simply, it changed my whole life, and I'm eternally grateful. It's because of this game that I'm this passionate about video games, because what a lot of people will never understand is that while games may seem like mindless, violent entertainment, they can inspire people. They can give people something to talk about. They can give people hope. They can help people through the worst emotions known to man. And yes, of course Majora's Mask gets a 5 out of 5. Why wouldn't it? Now, I want to say some final words. To those who have stuck with me these past 5 years through all the hardships and cringy moments I went through, thank you so much. To my friends who have helped me through life and are willing to listen to me ramble about what I'm thinking or feeling, thank you so much. I can be an emotional guy sometimes, and as long as it doesn't get out of control, that's okay. No one's perfect, so why try to act like it? And to anyone watching this video who's struggling with grief, depression, or possibly contemplating suicide, I just want to say to you all, I've been there. But I want you to keep going. Life is a beautiful thing that shouldn't be wasted. And if you need help of any kind, I promise you that someone out there will listen. Whether it be a friend, a parent, or even a therapist and or psychiatrist. And as someone who has gone through all these emotions before, I can promise you this. It's much better on this side. Just keep on running. Until then, I'm the Super Gamer, and thank you all so much for 5 amazing years. Bye-bye!